The Waldorf ballroom glittered like a jewelry box someone had shaken too hard. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across marble floors, while 300 guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos sipped champagne that cost more than monthly rent. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Maria Okonkwo moved through the crowd like a shadow, her white service uniform starched to military precision. The silver tray in her hands held canapés arranged in perfect rows. She kept her eyes down, her footsteps silent, her presence forgettable. That was the goal. Always be forgettable. Alessandro Marchetti stood near the ice sculpture, holding court with a cluster of donors. His royal blue tuxedo probably cost $6,000. His Italian leather shoes could have fed a family for months. He laughed too loudly at his own jokes, white teeth flashing under the chandeliers. Maria approached with the tray. She knew the routine. Offer food, say nothing, disappear. But as she drew close, Alessandro's voice shifted. Italian words rolled off his tongue, smooth and cruel. Ecco la cameriera. Guarda come cammina, come se appartenesse qui. The crowd around him chuckled. Maria's hand tightened on the tray. He continued, louder now, performing for his audience. È così divertente come pensano di essere persone vere. La aiuto che pensa di essere qualcuno. More laughter. A woman in emerald green covered her mouth, eyes dancing with amusement. A man in a burgundy vest slapped Alessandro's shoulder approvingly. Maria stood perfectly still. The tray didn't shake. Her face remained neutral, professionally blank. But something behind her eyes sharpened like a blade being drawn from its sheath. Alessandro noticed her stillness and grinned wider. He leaned toward his wife Giuliana, speaking just loud enough for Maria to hear. Non capisce nemmeno una parola. Potrei dire qualsiasi cosa. The words hung in the air like smoke. Maria's pulse thundered in her ears. Her father's voice whispered from memory. When they think you don't understand, that's when they reveal everything. She offered the tray. Alessandro took a canapé without looking at her. His fingers brushed the silver, leaving prints she would later polish away. He bit into the food and turned back to his audience, already forgetting she existed. But Maria had heard every word. And she had been listening for 2 years. Maria Okonkwo was 53 years old, and invisible by design. She lived in a studio apartment in Queens, 45 minutes by subway from Alessandro Marchetti's penthouse on the Upper East Side. The commute started at 5:30 every morning. She cleaned his marble floors before he woke, prepared his espresso the way Giuliana liked it, and disappeared into the service areas whenever guests arrived. The world saw a housekeeper. Maria saw everything they tried to hide. She had not always been invisible. Once in another lifetime, Professor Maria Okonkwo taught linguistics at the University of Lagos. She spoke 7 languages fluently: English, Yoruba, French, Italian, Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. Her students called her brilliant. Her colleagues respected her mind. Then her husband Emmanuel got sick. Cancer moved through his body like fire through dry grass. American doctors promised treatments Nigerian hospitals couldn't offer. They sold their house, cashed out savings borrowed from family. Emmanuel came to New York for experimental therapy that cost everything they had. He died anyway. 3 months after the funeral, Maria stood in a hospital billing office, staring at numbers that might as well have been written in blood. $600,000 in medical debt. No insurance, no way home. So she learned a new kind of invisibility. She took the first job that didn't ask questions, cleaning houses for people who never looked at her face. She scrubbed toilets in apartments bigger than her childhood home. She polished silver for families who spent more on flowers than she earned in a month. 2 years ago, an agency sent her to Alessandro Marchetti's penthouse. The pay was good. The hours were brutal. The work was beneath someone with 3 university degrees. But Maria had learned something her father taught her long ago. Powerful people talk freely around servants. They forget that silence doesn't mean stupidity. They assume invisibility means deafness. Alessandro Marchetti was one of those people. He ran the Marchetti Foundation, a charity promising to build schools across Africa. His gala events raised millions. His speeches about giving back moved donors to tears. Magazine profiles called him a humanitarian with vision. Maria dusted his office 3 times a week. She organized his files. She emptied his trash. And she noticed things: bank statements left on desks, phone calls taken in Italian when he thought no one was listening, wire transfer receipts tucked into books, emails printed and forgotten. Maria never asked questions. She simply cleaned, observed, and remembered everything her sharp mind catalogued. Tonight's gala was the foundation's biggest fundraiser of the year. Maria had been hired as extra serving staff. She wore the white uniform, carried the silver tray, and moved through the ballroom like furniture. But her mind was a recording device that never stopped running. And tonight, Alessandro Marchetti had just made a catastrophic mistake. He had forgotten that invisible doesn't mean powerless. Alessandro stepped onto the small stage near the orchestra. Applause rippled through the ballroom. He adjusted the microphone with practiced ease, his smile widening under the spotlight. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his accent flavoring the English just enough to sound exotic. "Your generosity will change lives across Africa." Maria stood near the kitchen entrance, tray balanced on her hip. She watched him perform. "You know," Alessandro continued, switching smoothly into Italian, "I was just telling my friends something amusing." He gestured toward the cluster of donors who had laughed earlier, "about how much we appreciate the help, even when they don't quite understand their place." The Italians in the crowd chuckled. Others looked confused but smiled anyway, not wanting to seem left out. Alessandro's eyes scanned the room and landed on Maria. He pointed directly at her. "Like her, brava donna, works very hard. But you know what's funny?" Maria's breath caught. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward her. "These people," Alessandro said, still in Italian, "they come to our country thinking they belong here. They serve our food, clean our homes, and somehow believe they're our equals." He laughed, and the sound carried across marble and crystal. "It's adorable, really. Like watching a dog try to sit at the dinner table." The laughter grew louder. A woman in lavender actually clapped. Security guards by the door grinned at each other. Maria's fingers dug into the silver tray. The metal edge cut into her palms. Heat flooded her face, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned this skill in hospital waiting rooms, in debt collection offices, in every space where showing emotion meant losing what little ground she had left. Alessandro wasn't finished. He leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried to every corner. "And the best part? She doesn't understand a single word I'm saying. I could tell her anything." He switched back to English, his tone dripping with false kindness. "Maria, sweetheart, could you bring some champagne to table 7? Maria nodded once. She turned toward the kitchen, her movements mechanical. But as Alessandro continued his speech, he made his fatal error. He turned to his wife, speaking rapidly in Italian, thinking he was being clever. "After tonight's deposits clear, we'll move another 2 million to the Cayman accounts. The foundation board is too stupid to check the actual school sites. We'll show them the same photos we used last year." Juliana giggled behind her champagne flute. "You're terrible." "I'm smart," Alessandro corrected. "Why actually build schools when we can just say we did? Africans don't have internet to fact-check. Donors don't care about results, they care about feeling good." Maria stopped walking. Her entire body went rigid. She had suspected. She had seen fragments. But hearing him say it out loud with such casual contempt was different. Alessandro noticed her stillness. "What's wrong, Maria? Don't understand Italian?" He laughed again, and the crowd joined him. Maria turned slowly. She looked directly at Alessandro Marchetti for the first time in 2 years of service. Really looked at him. And something in her expression made his smile falter, just for a second. Then she walked toward the kitchen, disappearing through the swinging doors. Behind her, the gala continued. The orchestra played. Champagne flowed. 300 people celebrated their generosity, while the man they honored described exactly how he was stealing from them. And Maria Okonkwo stood in the service corridor, her heart pounding like a war drum, her father's voice echoing in her mind. Words are weapons. Silence is strategy. She had been silent for 2 years. Tonight, that was going to change. The service corridor was all stainless steel and concrete. No windows, no decoration, just the bones of the building stripped bare for people no one wanted to see. Maria set the tray down on a prep table. Her hands were shaking now that no one was watching. She pressed her palms flat against the cold metal, trying to steady herself. The corridor was silent except for the muffled sound of the orchestra beyond the walls. Mozart. Probably the Piano Concerto No. 21. Alessandro loved that one. He played it in the penthouse while she scrubbed his floors. Maria's reflection stared back at her from the steel door. A woman in a white uniform, grey threading through her black hair despite her best efforts, lines around her eyes from squinting at fine print on bills she couldn't pay. 53 years old and invisible. When had she become this person? She remembered standing in front of university students, her voice confident as she explained the nuances of Yoruba grammar. She remembered Emmanuel bringing her flowers after her lectures, pride shining in his eyes. She remembered being someone. Now she was the help. The woman Alessandro could mock in front of 300 people without consequence. But inside her head, her mind was racing. Connecting dots, building a picture from 2 years of fragments. The phone calls Alessandro took in his study, speaking rapid Italian about creative accounting, the wire transfer receipts for amounts that never matched the Foundation's public reports, the photos of the same school building he'd used in 3 different presentations, claiming they were different sites. The way he'd casually mentioned the Cayman accounts, like they were common knowledge. Maria had cleaned his office every Tuesday and Friday. She'd organized his files while he was at lunch. She'd seen everything, understood everything, and said nothing, because that was survival. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Invisible women don't get deported or fired or destroyed by men with power and lawyers. But tonight, something had cracked open inside her chest. Maybe it was the laughter. Maybe it was Juliana's giggle. Maybe it was the way Alessandro had pointed at her like she was a prop in his performance. Or maybe it was her father's voice, cutting through the years. Intelligence without action is cowardice, Maria. She pressed harder against the steel table, the metal bit into her palms, grounding her. If she walked back into that ballroom and spoke, everything would change. Alessandro would deny it. His lawyers would destroy her. She'd lose her job, her work visa, everything she'd built from the ruins of her old life. But if she stayed silent, he would keep stealing, keep lying, keep building his empire on the backs of people who looked like her, while mocking them in languages they supposedly didn't understand. Maria straightened. She smoothed her uniform with deliberate precision. Her father had taught her 7 languages. Her mother had taught her to stand straight under pressure. Emmanuel had taught her that love sometimes meant sacrifice. She had been silent for 2 years. She had documentation for every suspicion, and she had one thing Alessandro Marchetti didn't know about. She had nothing left to lose. Lagos, 1995. Maria was 17 when her father brought her to his office at the embassy. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "We're going to learn something important." Her father, Adebayo Okonkwo, was a cultural attaché. His job required fluency in multiple languages and the ability to navigate complex political waters. He was brilliant, strategic, and relentlessly demanding of his only daughter. "Languages are weapons," he told her that day, sliding a French grammar book across the desk. "When you speak someone's language, you enter their world. You understand their thoughts. And most importantly," he leaned forward, his eyes intense, "they forget to guard their words around you." Maria learned French that year, Italian the next, Spanish after that. By the time she finished university, she spoke 7 languages and understood the power they gave her. "But here's the secret," her father said during her graduation dinner. "Silence is just as powerful as speech. When people think you don't understand, they reveal everything. Learn when to speak and when to listen." That lesson had carried her through her academic career. She'd built a life on those foundations, teaching, researching, building a family with Emmanuel. Then cancer came. Emmanuel had ignored the symptoms for months. By the time they caught it, the tumor was stage 4. Nigerian doctors shook their heads and suggested palliative care. "No," Emmanuel had said, his hand gripping hers. "We fight." So they fought. They sold their house in Ikoyi, their car, her jewelry. They borrowed from Emmanuel's brothers, her cousins, anyone who would lend. They flew to New York because American medicine promised miracles. The miracles cost everything they had. And then more. Emmanuel died on a Tuesday morning in March. The nurses were kind. The bills arrived on Friday. Maria remembered sitting in the hospital's financial office, staring at numbers that looked like death sentences. $600,000. The woman across the desk explained payment plans with practiced sympathy. "Do you have family who can help?" Maria thought of her aging parents in Lagos, her siblings with their own children to feed. "No." "Assets?" "We sold everything." The woman's sympathy hardened into professional distance. "Then you'll need to set up a payment arrangement. We require a minimum of $3,000 monthly." $3,000. Maria's entire professor salary in Lagos had been equivalent to $800 American monthly. She took the first job she could find, cleaning offices at night, then houses during the day, then whatever the agencies sent her to. She learned that invisible work paid better than visible work because wealthy people preferred not to see the hands that scrubbed their toilets. The Marchetti job came 2 years ago. Good pay, regular hours, and something else, something Maria's trained mind recognized immediately. Alessandro Marchetti was careless. He left documents everywhere. He spoke Italian freely, assuming his housekeeper was too simple to understand. He conducted business in the open because servants were furniture. Maria had spent 6 months just observing, taking mental notes, learning his patterns. Then she started documenting, photos of receipts when she emptied his study's wastepaper basket, voice recordings when he took calls on speaker, copies of bank statements he left in his office while she cleaned. She told herself it was insurance, protection in case he ever accused her of theft or tried to deport her. She never planned to use it. But now, standing in this service corridor while 300 people laughed at her humiliation, Maria understood something her father had tried to teach her years ago. Sometimes silence wasn't strategy. Sometimes silence was just fear wearing a different name. And she was done being afraid. Maria pushed through the swinging doors back into the ballroom. The gala was in full swing. The orchestra played. Couples danced. Alessandro stood near the bar, surrounded by admirers. She moved through the crowd differently now. Not invisible, not silent. Just watching. Waiting for the right moment. Alessandro's speech had been the mask-off moment she needed, but Maria's mind was already working through everything else she knew. 2 years of observation crystallized into a devastating picture. The Marchetti Foundation claimed to have built 47 schools across Kenya, Tanzania, and Nigeria. Maria had seen the promotional materials. She'd dusted the frames containing photos of smiling children in front of concrete buildings. But she'd also seen the metadata on the digital files. The same photo used for 3 different schools. The same children in multiple locations, their faces digitally altered slightly. The building exteriors that matched stock photography from architecture websites. She'd found the real bank statements in Alessandro's locked drawer, the one she'd learned to open with a paperclip after watching YouTube videos on her phone. Wire transfers going out, much smaller amounts coming back. The difference disappearing into accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland and Singapore. The Foundation's official budget showed construction costs, contractor payments, supply purchases, all documented with invoices that looked legitimate. But Maria had found the invoices before Alessandro submitted them. She'd seen the original amounts, far lower than what he reported. She'd watched him edit PDFs in his office, inflating numbers, creating phantom expenses. He was stealing from his own charity. Millions of dollars meant for schools for children, for futures. Money donated by people who believed they were changing lives. Alessandro had built an empire on lies, and he'd done it right in front of her. Never imagining that the woman cleaning his office understood every word of his phone calls, could read every document, and had been quietly photographing everything. Maria watched him laugh with a couple in designer clothes. The man wore cobalt blue. The woman's ivory gown probably cost more than Maria earned in 6 months. They were good people, probably, wealthy and generous and completely deceived. Her father's voice whispered, "When they think you don't understand, that's when they reveal everything." Alessandro had revealed everything. He just didn't know she'd been listening. A waiter passed with champagne. Maria took a glass. Her hand was steady now. The decision had been made somewhere in that service corridor, in the space between humiliation and rage. She walked toward the small stage where Alessandro had given his speech. The microphone still stood there, waiting. A woman in dusty rose touched her arm. "Excuse me, could you bring more canapes?" Maria looked at her, really looked at her. The woman's smile was automatic, dismissive. She'd already forgotten asking. To her, Maria was just staff. "In a moment," Maria said quietly. She continued toward the stage. Security guards flanked it. They watched her approach with bored expressions. Just the help. No threat. Maria climbed the 3 steps. Her white uniform seemed to glow under the stage lights. The orchestra finished their piece, and for a moment the ballroom hung in that expectant silence between songs. Maria reached for the microphone. A security guard moved toward her. "Ma'am, you can't—" She spoke before he could finish, and she spoke in Italian. Perfect, unaccented, fluent Italian. "Buonasera." Her voice carried across the ballroom through the sound system. "Il signor Marchetti ha appena detto qualcosa di molto interessante." The room froze. 300 conversations stopped. The orchestra conductor's baton hung in mid-air. Alessandro's face drained of color. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Maria continued, her Italian flowing like water. She recited his earlier words back to him. Every insult, every cruel joke, every mocking phrase. She spoke calmly, clearly, so everyone who understood Italian would hear exactly what he'd said. Some donors gasped. Others pulled out their phones. A woman in blush pink covered her mouth. Alessandro's wife Giuliana stood frozen, her face white. "Ma questo non è tutto," Maria said. "This isn't everything." Her voice didn't shake. "Vorrei anche parlare dei conti bancari alle Cayman, the Cayman accounts." The words hung in the air like a bomb whose fuse had just been lit. Alessandro found his voice. "Security! Get her off that stage!" But before the guards could move, Maria switched to English. "For 2 years I've cleaned Mr. Marchetti's office. I've organized his files. I've been invisible, and I've watched him steal from you. All of you." The ballroom erupted. Chaos bloomed like a flower made of noise. Donors surged toward the stage. Security guards closed in. Alessandro pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. "She's lying." His voice boomed through the ballroom. "This is a disturbed woman. She's been making threats. Maria stood at the microphone, her heart hammering but her voice steady. I have documentation. Bank statements, wire transfers, photos of the fake school sites. She's a disgruntled employee, Juliana added, her voice shrill. We fired her last week for theft. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some faces showed doubt, others anger. They didn't know who to believe. A man in a mustard-yellow suit stepped forward. He was a board member. Maria recognized him from the penthouse. Alessandro, perhaps we should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss. Alessandro snapped. This woman is mentally unstable. She's angry because we caught her stealing silverware. Maria's stomach dropped. He was good at this, smooth, convincing. He had practiced lying to rooms full of people. I have proof, Maria repeated. On my phone. Photos of bank statements showing... Your phone? Alessandro's head of security stepped onto the stage. His name was Marco, and Maria had served him coffee dozens of times. He looked at her now like she was something dirty. You mean the phone you used to photograph confidential employer documents? The trap snapped shut before Maria could see it coming. That's theft, Marco continued, his voice carrying authority. Theft of proprietary information. Corporate espionage. Alessandro's expression shifted from rage to wounded righteousness. I've tried to help this woman. We gave her employment when no one else would. We paid her generously, and this is how she repays us? With lies and theft. He turned to the crowd, his hands spread in appeal. I understand she's struggling. Her husband died. She has debts. But to make these wild accusations... They're not wild, Maria interrupted. You said it yourself, tonight, on this stage. You talked about moving $2 million to the Cayman accounts. You said the board was too stupid to check the school sites. You said... I said nothing of the sort. Alessandro's voice rose. You're confused. Your Italian is barely functional. My Italian is perfect, Maria said quietly. And so is my French, Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, and Yoruba. I was a linguistics professor before I cleaned your floors. For one heartbeat, she saw doubt flicker across some faces. A woman in gold frowned. A man in white whispered to his companion, but Alessandro recovered fast. He laughed. It sounded genuine, almost kind. Professor. Oh, Maria, this is sad. This is truly sad. He addressed the crowd. She's having some kind of episode. Someone call an ambulance. She needs help, not punishment. The narrative shifted. Maria watched it happen in real time. Faces that had shown interest now showed pity, or worse, uncomfortable dismissal. The crazy housekeeper having a breakdown. Marco's hand closed on her arm. Come on, let's get you... No, Maria pulled free. Wait, I can show you. The phone has everything. Wire transfers, fake invoices, photos of... The phone you stole from Mr. Marchetti's office. Marco's voice was gentle, professional. The phone containing stolen proprietary information? Maria's blood turned to ice. It's my phone, with his documents on it. Photographed without permission. Marco gestured to two other security guards. We're going to need to confiscate that as evidence. Corporate theft is a serious crime. The crowd watched in silence as Maria's phone was taken from her pocket. Her evidence, her proof, her only weapon. Alessandro watched with an expression of patient concern. I won't press charges. She's clearly unwell. But the phone stays with us for now. A board member stepped forward. Alessandro, perhaps we should still review the Foundation's accounts. Absolutely. Alessandro agreed smoothly. Full transparency. I have nothing to hide. We'll schedule an audit for next month. But right now I think we should let this poor woman go home and rest. It was brilliant. He looked generous, understanding, and victimized all at once. Maria stood on the stage, her proof confiscated, her credibility destroyed. Around her, the gala was already returning to normal. The orchestra prepared to play. Waiters cleared Alessandro's broken champagne glass. She had spoken. She had revealed everything. And somehow she was still invisible. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Maria sat in a service hallway while two officers took statements. Marco had called them. Corporate theft, he explained. She photographed confidential documents. Alessandro didn't attend this part. He'd returned to the ballroom, to his donors, to his performance of wounded dignity. But Juliana came, her face hard with anger. She's been stealing for months, Juliana told the officers. We suspected but couldn't prove it. Tonight she finally showed her true colors. Officer Chen looked at Maria. Ma'am, do you have anything to say? Maria's voice felt distant. He was stealing from his charity. I have proof. Proof you obtained illegally, Officer Wilson noted. Even if what you say is true, you can't photograph someone's private documents without permission. But the schools, Maria started, are a separate issue, Chen interrupted. Right now we're dealing with corporate theft. We need to take you in. The handcuffs were cold. Maria had never felt metal like that against her wrists. They walked her through the service exit, away from the gala, away from the 300 witnesses who would remember her as the crazy housekeeper, not the truth-teller. The squad car smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Maria sat in the back, hands cuffed, and watched the Waldorf disappear behind her. She had played it wrong. She'd spoken when she should have planned. She'd confronted when she should have strategized. Her father would have been disappointed. At the precinct, they processed her, took her fingerprints, her photograph, put her in a holding cell with fluorescent lights and concrete benches. Maria sat alone and stared at the gray walls. Her phone was evidence now, locked away in Alessandro's possession or police custody, her only proof of anything gone. Through the walls she heard other women talking, laughing, crying, the sounds of people whose lives had also fallen apart in the space of an evening. She had tried to speak. The words had felt powerful in her mouth, sharp and true, but Alessandro's words had been sharper, his lies more polished, his performance more believable. And now Maria was in a cage while he returned to his penthouse, his empire intact. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Hours passed. No one came. Maria closed her eyes and saw Emmanuel's face. We fight, he'd said, but he'd lost that fight. And now she was losing too. Her father's voice whispered, intelligence without action is cowardice. She'd taken action. Look where it had gotten her. The cell was cold. Maria wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to think about deportation, about debt, about everything she'd lost when she'd found her voice. She had spoken in 7 languages. Alessandro had destroyed her in one. Outside, the city continued. The gala ended. Donors went home feeling generous. Alessandro Marchetti slept peacefully in his penthouse, while 300 miles away. Children who would never see the schools he'd promised remained invisible, just like Maria. She pressed her forehead against the concrete wall. The coldness helped. She counted her heartbeats, remembered her father's lessons, thought about Emmanuel's fight, and somewhere in the long, cold hours before dawn, Maria realized something. She had spoken too soon. But she hadn't spoken everything. The phone was gone. But phones were just tools. The real evidence was in her mind. Every account number, every wire transfer date, every conversation she'd overheard, and something else. Something Alessandro didn't know about. Maria had made copies, not just on her phone. The thought flickered like a candle in darkness. Small but stubborn, if she got out. If she survived this, if she could reach the right people. The fight wasn't over. But first she had to get through this night, 3 a.m. The holding cell felt smaller with every passing hour. Maria sat on the concrete bench, her white uniform wrinkled and stained. The fluorescent lights hummed their mechanical song. No one had answered when she'd used her single phone call. The number she'd dialed, her cousin in Brooklyn, had gone straight to voicemail. She'd left a message. It's Maria, I'm in trouble. The words had felt hollow even as she spoke them. Now she was alone. The other cells had gone quiet. Somewhere down the corridor, a woman cried softly, The sound echoed off concrete and steel. Maria's mind kept replaying the gala. Alessandro's laughter. The crowd's faces shifting from shock to pity. Her phone disappearing into Marco's hands. The cold snap of handcuffs. She had been so certain. Speaking felt like power. Truth felt like a weapon. But Alessandro had turned her truth into a lie faster than she could defend it. He'd made her look crazy, desperate, vengeful. By tomorrow morning, his lawyers would paint her as an unstable immigrant trying to extort money from a generous employer. The deportation papers would follow. Then the flight back to Lagos, back to nothing. Emmanuel's face appeared in her memory, his smile on their wedding day. His hand in hers during the diagnosis. His last breath in that hospital room while machines beeped their useless rhythms. "I'm sorry," she whispered to his ghost. "I tried, but trying wasn't enough." She'd learned that in hospital billing offices, in debt collection calls, in every space where her intelligence meant nothing because her bank account was empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder. Or maybe that was just the sound of her father's disappointed silence. He'd taught her strategy. She'd given him recklessness. Maria closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw the Marchetti penthouse, the study where Alessandro conducted his business, the locked drawer she'd learned to open, the file cabinet in the corner. Wait. Her eyes snapped open. The file cabinet. The one she'd organized last month while Alessandro was in meetings. She'd found hard copies there, backup documents he kept just in case, invoices with the original amounts before he edited them, correspondence with fake contractors. She'd photographed those too, but not on her phone. Maria stood, her heart suddenly racing. She'd used a different device, a small digital camera she'd bought at a pawn shop for $30. Something with no cloud connection, no data plan, nothing Alessandro could trace. The camera was hidden in her apartment, behind the loose tile in her bathroom, the one spot she'd designated for things that mattered. The evidence wasn't just on her confiscated phone. There was a backup. Physical proof Alessandro didn't know existed, but she was in a holding cell, and her apartment in Queens might as well have been on the moon. Maria pressed her hands against the concrete wall. The coldness helped her think. Her father's voice returned, quieter now. One battle lost doesn't mean the war is over. She had lost tonight. But if she could get out, if she could reach the camera, if she could find someone who would listen, the fight wasn't finished. Morning brought a visitor Maria hadn't expected. The guard called her name at 7 a.m. Okonkwo. Someone posted bail. Maria followed him through grey corridors to a processing room. Her hands shook as she signed forms, retrieved her belongings. Wallet, keys, everything except her phone. In the waiting area, a woman stood by the window. Asian, mid-40s, wearing a grey blazer and an expression of careful neutrality. "Professor Okonkwo," the woman said. "I'm Catherine Way. We've met before." Maria's exhausted mind struggled to place her. Then memory clicked. The Atlantic article. "You needed Portuguese documents translated 2 years ago. You helped me without asking for payment." Catherine gestured toward the exit. "Can we talk?" They found a coffee shop 3 blocks away. Catherine ordered 2 cups while Maria sat in a booth, feeling disconnected from her own body. "I saw the video," Catherine said, sliding coffee across the table. "Someone posted it online." "Your speech at the gala," Maria's stomach clenched. "It doesn't matter." "He made me look credible," Catherine interrupted. "You looked credible." Marchetti looked nervous. "His lawyers will destroy me." "Maybe." Catherine pulled out a tablet. "But I've been investigating Marchetti for 6 months. I'm a financial journalist. My focus is charity fraud." Maria's hands tightened around the coffee cup. "Why?" "Because rich men stealing from fake charities is my specialty. And Marchetti has been on my radar since last year." Catherine's eyes were sharp. "But I've never had inside access. Until now." Hope flickered, dangerous and fragile. "My phone is evidence. They took everything." "Phones aren't the only way to store information." Catherine leaned forward. You said you have documentation. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Is that true? Maria thought of the camera. The hidden tile. The backup evidence Alessandro didn't know existed. Yes, then we need to get it. And I need you to tell me everything you know. Account numbers, transfer dates, names of fake contractors. Catherine's expression was intense. Can you do that? I can remember all of it. Maria's voice steadied. Every conversation I overheard. Every document I saw. I have a photographic memory for languages and numbers. Catherine smiled for the first time. Then we have a chance. But we need to move carefully. Marchetti will be watching you. He thinks I'm finished. Good, let him think that. Catherine opened a notes app on her tablet. I have a contact, FBI. He's been building a case against charity fraud operations. With your testimony and evidence, we can give him exactly what he needs. Maria felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but possibility. Alessandro said he'd do a foundation audit. Next month. He'll clean everything up before then. Let him try. If we move fast enough, it won't matter. Catherine's fingers moved across the tablet. Here's what we're going to do. First, you go home. Get whatever evidence you have. Don't tell anyone. Don't trust anyone. Then you meet me at this address. She wrote on a napkin. This afternoon. 2 p.m. What happens then? Then we bring everything to Special Agent Morrison, and we start building a case that will end Alessandro Marchetti. Maria looked at the napkin. An address in Lower Manhattan. A chance she hadn't expected. A path forward she thought had closed. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. Catherine met her eyes. Because 2 years ago you helped me when you had nothing to gain. You translated those documents for free. You gave me your time and expertise without asking questions. She paused. And because men like Marchetti only win when women like us stay silent. The coffee shop hummed with morning activity. People ordered lattes and checked phones and lived their ordinary lives. Maria sat in the middle of it all, exhausted and terrified and suddenly, impossibly armed. 2 p.m., she repeated. Catherine nodded. Don't be late, and don't let Marchetti know you've talked to anyone. 1 week later, Federal Courthouse, Lower Manhattan. The preliminary hearing room was smaller than Maria expected. Wood paneling. Fluorescent lights. Rows of chairs for observers. The mundane setting for lives being dismantled. Alessandro sat at the defense table with 3 lawyers in expensive suits. He wore charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. When Maria entered, his eyes found her. His expression flickered, surprise, then rage, then careful neutrality. Maria sat in the witness section. Catherine Way sat 2 rows back, notepad ready. Special Agent Morrison stood near the prosecutor's table, his face unreadable. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The formalities began. Then the prosecutor called Maria to the stand. She walked forward on steady legs. The Bible felt heavy under her palm. She swore to tell the truth. Alessandro's lawyer watched her like a predator timing an attack. Ms. Okonkwo, the prosecutor began, how long did you work for Alessandro Marchetti? 2 years. As his housekeeper? During that time, did you observe anything unusual about his business practices? Alessandro's lead lawyer stood. Objection. Leading question. Sustained. The judge nodded. Rephrase. The prosecutor smiled slightly. What did you observe during your employment? Maria took a breath. I observed Mr. Marchetti conducting conversations in Italian about financial transfers. I saw bank statements showing wire transfers to offshore accounts. I found invoices with amounts that had been altered. And how did you come to see these documents? I cleaned his office. He left papers on his desk. Did you photograph these documents? Yes. With his permission? No. A murmur rippled through the room. Alessandro's lawyer leaned toward his client, whispering, Why did you photograph them? The prosecutor asked. Because I understood what they meant. I speak Italian fluently. I heard Mr. Marchetti discussing how he was stealing from the Marchetti Foundation. how he was creating fake schools and keeping the donation money. Alessandro's lawyer shot up. Objection! Hearsay and speculation. Your Honor, the prosecutor countered. Ms. Okonkwo's testimony goes to her direct observations. We have corroborating evidence. I'll allow it. For now. The judge looked at Maria. Continue. Maria's heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. On the night of the gala, Mr. Marchetti spoke in Italian about moving $2 million to Cayman accounts. He said the foundation board was too stupid to check if schools actually existed. He said Africans don't have internet to fact-check his claims. Objection! The lawyer's voice rose. My client never said any such thing. The prosecutor walked to a table and picked up a tablet. Your Honor, we have audio evidence. The courtroom went silent. Audio from where? The judge asked. From the gala. Multiple guests recorded portions of Mr. Marchetti's speech on their phones. One recording caught him speaking in Italian. The prosecutor pressed play. Alessandro's voice filled the courtroom. Italian words clear and damning. Every phrase Maria had testified to, every mocking comment, every admission about the fake schools and offshore accounts. The color drained from Alessandro's face. His lawyers hunched together, whispering frantically. Additionally, the prosecutor continued, we have physical evidence. He held up a folder. Documents obtained from a search warrant of Mr. Marchetti's office. Bank statements showing transfers totaling $8.3 million to shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. More folders appeared, screenshots of fake school photos, invoices showing original amounts before digital alteration, correspondence with contractors who didn't exist. Ms. Okonkwo provided account numbers and transfer dates from memory, the prosecutor said. Special Agent Morrison's team verified every single one. The foundation raised $32 million in 3 years. Only $6 million went to legitimate construction. The rest disappeared into Mr. Marchetti's private accounts. The gallery erupted. Journalists scribbled notes. Foundation board members sat frozen in shock. Alessandro stood suddenly. This is ridiculous. She's a criminal. She stole Mr. Marchetti. The judge's voice cut through the noise. Sit down. But Alessandro was unraveling. She's lying. She's angry because we fired her. She photographed confidential documents. Mr. Marchetti. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt. Maria watched from the witness stand. This was the moment. The truth finally landing. Not her truth against his lies. Just truth verified and undeniable. The prosecutor turned to Maria. Ms. Okonkwo, one final question. Why did you come forward? Maria looked directly at Alessandro. His perfect suit. His expensive lawyers. His empire built on stolen dreams. Because he thought I was invisible, she said quietly. He thought I couldn't understand. He thought I didn't matter. She paused. He was wrong. The courtroom held its breath. No further questions, the prosecutor said. Alessandro's lawyer stood for cross-examination. But what could he ask? The evidence was everywhere. Audio recordings, bank statements, wire transfers traced to accounts in Alessandro's name. He tried anyway. Ms. Okonkwo, isn't it true you were fired for theft? No, I was never fired. I worked until the night of the gala. You photographed confidential documents without permission. I documented crimes. You have significant debts. Medical bills. Perhaps you hope to profit from this. I hoped, Maria interrupted, her voice clear, that children who were promised schools might actually get them. The lawyer had nothing left. He sat down. The judge looked at Alessandro. Mr. Marchetti, you're remanded into custody pending trial. Bail is set at $5 million. Marshall moved forward. Alessandro's face went white. Your Honor, I can pay. I'm sure you can. With stolen money. The judge's expression was granite. Marshall, take him. Maria watched as Alessandro Marchetti was led away in handcuffs. His lawyer scrambled. His wife Juliana sobbed in the gallery. Board members rushed for exits, already crafting statements of shocked innocence. Catherine Way caught Maria's eye and nodded once. A small acknowledgement. "We did it." Maria stepped down from the witness stand. Her white uniform was gone, replaced by a borrowed navy suit. But she still felt like herself. Finally, the invisible woman had become the witness who changed everything. 6 months later, the trial had lasted 3 weeks. Alessandro's lawyers had fought brilliantly, but evidence was evidence. Bank records didn't lie, audio recordings didn't forget, and Maria's testimony, corroborated by Agent Morrison's investigation, had been unshakable. Guilty on 19 counts: fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, tax evasion, 12 years in federal prison. The judge had been clear in her sentencing statement. "You stole from the vulnerable while claiming to help them. You deserve no mercy." The Marchetti Foundation had been dissolved. Its remaining legitimate assets were distributed to actual charities. Real schools were being built with the recovered money, overseen by independent auditors. Juliana had filed for divorce. The penthouse was for sale. The empire had crumbled. Maria stood in her new apartment in Astoria. It was small, studio-like before, but it was hers. No debt, no medical bills. The whistleblower compensation from the FBI had been substantial. Enough to clear everything Emmanuel's illness had left behind. She'd used some of it to fly her parents to New York for a visit. They'd left last week, proud and relieved. Her father had hugged her at the airport. "You remembered," he'd said. "When to speak, when to listen." Now Maria taught evening classes at a community center, English for immigrants who needed it. She recognized herself in their faces. Intelligent people dismissed because of language, skin color, or circumstances. "Words are weapons," she told them. But so is silence. Learn when to use each. On her desk, a framed photograph, Emmanuel on their wedding day. Next to it, a letter from the FBI thanking her for her assistance. And a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Housekeeper's Testimony Brings Down Charity Fraud Empire." Maria looked at her reflection in the window. 53. Grey hair she no longer tried to hide. Lines around her eyes. The same face that had been invisible for so long. But when she looked now, she saw someone different. Not a professor, not a housekeeper, just Maria. A woman who had been silent when it served her, and spoken when it mattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from Catherine Way. "Coffee tomorrow? Want to discuss another case. Could use your expertise," Maria smiled. She typed back, "Yes." The city lights flickered beyond her window. Somewhere out there, other people were being dismissed, underestimated, rendered invisible. Other lies were being told in languages the powerful thought no one understood. But Maria knew something now. She'd learned it in holding cells and courtrooms, in humiliation and vindication. Invisible doesn't mean powerless. Silent doesn't mean stupid. And being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage of all. She closed her laptop and looked at Emmanuel's photograph. "We fought," she whispered, "and we won." The apartment was quiet, but it was the good kind of quiet, the kind that came after storms, the kind that meant peace. Maria teaches every Tuesday and Thursday now. The community center is fluorescent lit and cramped, nothing like her university lecture halls in Lagos, but the students are eager, their eyes bright with hope and determination. She stands at the front of the classroom and tells them something important. People will underestimate you. They'll see your accent, your skin, your circumstances, and decide you're less than. Let them. The students look confused. A woman from Haiti raises her hand. Why? Because underestimation is a weapon that cuts both ways. When they think you don't understand, they reveal everything. When they think you don't matter, they get careless. And when they finally realize their mistake, it's already too late. She thinks of Alessandro, his casual cruelty, his certainty that his housekeeper was too simple to understand Italian. his belief that invisibility meant irrelevance. But here's what you must remember, Maria continues. Being underestimated isn't an excuse for silence. It's a strategy. There's a time to listen and a time to speak. Learn the difference. Her students nod. They understand. Most of them have spent their lives being invisible too. After class, Maria walks home through Queens. The evening air is cool. The subway rumbles beneath her feet. The city that almost destroyed her now feels like home. She thinks about the night at the Waldorf. The chandelier light, Alessandro's mocking laughter. The moment she'd climbed those stage steps and found her voice, she'd been terrified, but she'd spoken anyway. That's the thing about power she's learned. It doesn't come from money or position or perfect timing. It comes from knowing your own worth, even when no one else does. Alessandro Marchetti had tried to erase her with words, but Maria Okonkwo had erased him with truth. The moral is simple but hard-earned. Arrogance blinds. Humility observes. And justice, when it finally arrives, speaks in every language. Back in her apartment, Maria makes tea. She sits by the window and watches the city lights. Tomorrow she'll teach again. Next week she'll help Catherine with another investigation. Next month maybe she'll start writing. A book about languages, power, and the women who wield both. But tonight she simply sits in the quiet. A woman who was invisible, who was dismissed, who was mocked in Italian at a gala by a man who thought she couldn't understand. That man is in prison now. And Maria is free. She raises her teacup to the window, to the city, to Emmanuel's memory. Saluti, she whispers in Italian. Cheers, the night whispers back in 7 languages. And every single one of them says the same thing. You survived. You spoke. You won. Maria Okonkwo smiles and drinks her tea. The fight is over, but she's still standing, and that in the end is everything.